Welcome to What It Takes. I'm Tom Landon. The superintendent of schools in Roanoke City occupies a particularly important place in our region. As the largest urban division in Southwest Virginia, Roanoke City Schools gets called on to play a major role in the community when it comes not only to educating our children, but in making sure we have a prepared workforce with the skills needed to ensure the success of all of us. Joining me today is Verletta White. Though she's been on the job for over a year now, the pandemic limited her ability to meet as many of us as I'm sure she'd like. So I'm delighted to welcome her to Blue Ridge PBS. Welcome, Mrs. White.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for having me.
You were on my list. You know, when they said I was going to be hosting the show this year, you were on my list. I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to meet you and talk to you. And I'm sorry I haven't up to now. So let's just start. You know, you're the superintendent of Roanoke City Schools.
Yes.
I know you came from Maryland. There are a lot of opportunities for superintendents right now. There are always a lot of openings, and it's a competitive field. But what made you think that Roanoke might be a good fit for you?
Yeah, I was very selective when I started considering, other superintendencies. And so I didn't throw my hat into just any ring. My husband and I visited different places. We did our homework, we did our research. And upon visiting, really, it only took a visit or two to understand how wonderful Roanoke is. And so when you think about the values of the community and when you talk to the people, you realize very quickly that it's not just beautiful in landscape, but it's beautiful in culture, and the people are beautiful as well. So it is home, it feels like home, and we knew that right away. So we targeted Roanoke to see if we could make Roanoke our home.
Well, you know, Roanoke is attracting a lot of professionals right now. We're happy that it attracted you as well. What should we know about you? I mean, unfortunately, as I said in the introduction, you came at a rough time, but what are some things that people are going to learn about you as you spend more time here with us?
Well, I do often get this question about why now? Why would you take this on in a global pandemic? And to that, I would say that experience is a good teacher. I've had the unique blessing to work and serve the public and serve children in various roles, from teacher, and I was an elementary school teacher, I was an elementary school principal, and I ran professional development in the district, and in Maryland for about 4 years. I became an assistant superintendent, on to chief academic officer, and then ultimately to superintendent. And I think for those of us who have been working with children and their families for a number of years especially, that when we know that in critical times, we should step up. We should step up and offer our service and continue to serve because we do know what children need. And it doesn't matter where they are. They can be in Maryland, they can be throughout the nation or even throughout the world. Kids are kids, and they need our love, they need our care, support, and they need quality teaching and learning. So I thought it was my duty and my service to step up at this time.
I had a much briefer career as a school administrator myself, and I know that when I sat in that chair, my lens changed quite a bit. Yeah. As you made the move from the classroom into more of a central office role, a principal role, whatever it was, what were some things that surprised you, or things that you realized, oh, now I understand a little bit?
Well, I do think, again, it's about advocacy, and it's not just about support and supervision and those kinds of things and monitoring that we naturally do when we are involved in the schoolhouse. Those are the things that we do. We make sure that we have high quality teaching and learning on a daily basis, making sure that we have students connected to programs to give them a sense of belonging. But then as you move out of the classroom into other positions, we want to make sure that everyone knows what children need, because it takes the entire community, the broader community. It takes our elected officials, it takes our parents and community members, as well as institutions of higher education, for all of us to wrap our arms around kids. That means that people need to know what our children need. And so for those of us who have had experience in the classroom, it's also our responsibility to share and to make sure that we are advocating for those supports.
One thing that I've read is that often when a new CEO comes to a corporation or someone comes to your position, it is estimated that it takes 12 to 18 months in normal times just to get around so that when you see somebody, you know, A, that they work with you, and B, what they do and what their gifts and contributions might be, what things to avoid. You came at a particularly difficult time. How was that for you, and how, you know, what have you been trying to do as the pandemic is easing, we hope, to kind of make up for those times that you didn't get in your first 6, 8, 10, 12 months here?
Such a good question. You know, I was really concerned about that as well. I wanted to make sure that I had a connection to the community and to our students and to our teachers, to our principals. So my very first week on the job, I had members of my executive team, and we got on a school bus and we traveled from neighborhood to neighborhood. At that time, it was at the height of COVID, so I wasn't sure if people would come out. It was the summertime. So here it is in July, and I said, hey, I'm going to be around. I hope you'll come out. And they did. Principals were there. We were all outside. We were all masked. We were all distanced. But parents came out, community members. I was able to meet children. I was able to meet clergy and members of the community. And again, making those connections, it's so very important for me to know who the people are who are serving our little people.
Right. And again, just following up on that, I mean, you came at a time when everything was virtual, right? There were no students in the buildings at the start of the school year.
That's right.
And as now you've been able to get out a little more, I know, I can follow you, I see where you are each day. What has that sort of done for your soul as an educator and somebody who cares about kids to be able to actually be in the buildings with them again?
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to see students in person again. It's so critically important. You know, I often say that school is more than school. So it's not just about the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, which of course they're critically important, but it's also about the social emotional learning. It's also about making sure that kids don't feel isolated. We know that isolation is not necessarily a good thing.
Right.
Kids need to be able to connect. They need to have that sense of belonging. As teachers, we're teaching to our students' eyes. We don't teach to the clock. We're teaching to their eyes. So we want to make sure that they're getting an understanding of the content, but we also want to make sure that they're okay. I know how to teach reading. I think I consider myself a pretty good teacher, but I don't know how to teach a hungry child. And so it's important for us to take care of students' physical and physiological needs as well as their academic needs. And that is better, I think, done in person. Now, some of our students thrive in the virtual setting. And so we do have about 600 kids who have done well in the previous year, who are still in the virtual setting, and they're supported by their parents, and they do well. But I would say the majority of our students do best in person, and it's better for us to be able to connect with them as well.
Right, as somebody who's been deeply involved in virtual learning my whole career, the big difference that we found was the difference between voluntary students who were choosing virtual, and all of a sudden everybody involuntary.
That's right.
Students, and it was a real struggle there for a while. As you had to make assessments about where you wanted to go with the division, how has what's unique about Roanoke City kind of shaped where you want to take the division?
Yeah, well, again, when we take a look and at the trajectory of the workforce, for instance, when we talk to business leaders and thinking about even institutions of higher education, college and university presidents, we realize what's to come. We have to be forward-thinking in our planning. We're right now in the middle of our strategic planning process and looking ahead over the next 5 years. Of course, my plan coming in is entitled Destination 2030, because we can't just be so short-sighted that we think about right now. We have to backwardly map our actions for our kids based on the future that awaits them. So over the next 5 to 10 years, we know that automation is going to take over a lot of the positions that are in play right now, right? A lot of the jobs that we have now will be phased out because of automation. We also know that the standards will be higher with kids needing to problem solve and needing to be agile and flexible. So they have to be able to shift and move, and we have to teach that very early on. So in looking out and being forward thinking, we know that those are the kinds of things that we have to put in place now for our students and not wait until it comes. Now, we have some learning loss to address based on the pandemic. So yes, we are really kind of honing in on those ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and the basics and the fundamentals, and getting them caught up so that we can have them able to access the pathways that we want them to be able to choose. Everything from career readiness to college readiness, whatever our children choose, they should be prepared to do so before they leave us. I always say I want our kids to graduate not only with a diploma, but a resume.
Well, and that whole idea of career readiness and college readiness, you know this, I know this, they're not two separate things.
That's right.
Students who go the technical path and take a job may very well one day end up at a university to further their careers again.
Yes.
And students who go to university may decide that they want to work in HVAC or whatever it might be. So they're very, they're all related. You've got 2 high schools, and I taught at Fleming, so I go Colonels, and
yes.
I had a son who went to PH, 2 sons who went to PH. They're both new, and yet in reading your plans for 2030, when those schools were built, some decisions were made that leave, especially when it comes to careers, leave the schools very different places. Can we talk about that a little bit? Just tell me what you're thinking about. We talk about equity and inclusion all the time, right? So what needs fixing and kind of how are we going to get there?
Well, when I got here, I did realize that we had some inequities when it came to our career and technical education programs. And so I am just so proud of the plan that was just recently approved, not only by our school board, but also our city council. And that is our Equity in Action plan. And that really is based on a career and technical education equity project. So right now we have what we call RoTech, right, our technical education center that is at Gibney Hall on the grounds of PH. And we have wonderful programs there. And I was just there today watching our culinary students and our welding students and all really have that hands-on experience. Well, only about 30% or 35% of our students at William Fleming are able to participate because they have to give up an elective in order to travel.
They actually have to take a bus, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't seem like much, but it takes 25 minutes to get from Fleming to PH, and you have to do that twice, right?
Well, exactly. So they'll have to travel, and they'll have to give up an elective to do so. So in this Equity in Action plan, it's really a 3-phased approach over the next 3 years to benefit not only our students, but also our school system in the city. And that involves having a RoTech, similar to what we have at Gibney Hall, at Ruffner, which is adjacent to the grounds of Fleming. And really, that's what we mean by access and opportunity. It's equality and equity. Having our students take advantage of courses such as the culinary arts and welding and cosmetology and barbering and landscaping and criminal justice even, and looking at public safety. We have, in both of these programs, we'll elevate both, where we'll have an entrepreneurship strand that runs through each, and a financial literacy strand that will run through both programs as well, so that if children choose to start their own businesses, then we can give them a good start, and hopefully we'll have their businesses be successful as well. That's just one phase of it. The next phase is also taking the current administration building for Roanoke City and making a community empowerment center. Because if we support our families, we naturally support our children. So making sure that parents have help with school registration, that we have job fairs on site, that we'll have a parent and guardian university to help parents with workshops on managing problematic behavior or helping your child with anxiety. Those real everyday things that parents tell us that they need their help and support with. And then by us moving downtown at the Roanoke Times building, we'll be able to centralize our systems so that we have more efficiency. And I think it'll also be good for the city because we have to eat lunch, so we'll be able to populate maybe some of the restaurants in the area.
I'm sure that a lot of your administrative employees who have been at it's the old Booker T
Yes,
building,
yes.
which is a very old building, are going to be very happy about being downtown. Logistically, what does that look like to move all of those departments, all of that infrastructure that you have in your current administrative offices to a building that wasn't designed to be an administrative building? That's a really curious building.
Well, we had our engineers and architects come in, and besides that, we want to be fiscally responsible. So that's the reason why I said it's a phased approach. It's not anything that we can flip the switch and do overnight, nor should we. Our children come first. So the very first thing we want to do is to stand up the technical education program at the Ruffner site so that our children have right away, it's sooner rather than later, the benefit of those ROTEC programs that I spoke of first. So that's in year one. And so this will be 3 phases over the next 3 years so that we can, again, be methodical and responsible in our approach moving forward.
Well, and I know that Ruffner building well because I taught video production there in what was a studio then, and I know that it had formerly been an industrial arts building. So it's interesting to see
full circle.
It's sort of coming back first full circle. One of the things that is part of your Destination 2030 plan, you talk about hiring practices.
Yes.
It's hard to find teachers right now. It's hard to keep teachers right now. And you also, I'm sure, would like a faculty that reflects the community.
Yes.
So you're fighting, not fighting, but it is competitive with all of the other divisions in the area. How important is that to you? And again, how do we make that change to really attract the very best?
Well, I do want everyone to know how wonderful Roanoke City Public Schools is, right? So I think that happens in our recruiting practices, reaching out to our college and university partners, creating pathway programs, starting early with our high school students to let them know that education is a viable profession and that without education, no other profession would exist. So there is honor there, there's dignity, there's pride, and so we want our young people to know that education is something to be proud of if they're choosing that as a profession. But we do have to actively recruit, and we do want a workforce that is reflective of our student base in our community. Because when kids need to see themselves not only in the books and materials that they use, but they need to see themselves in the staff members who serve them as well. So we want a staffing that's as reflective of our student base. And that means, yes, recruiting them, but also making sure that we're placing value on the compensation and support. When people leave, that's for any industry, many times they're not leaving because of compensation alone.
Right.
They leave because they don't feel supported. And so we want that help to feel like help.
I worked in a school in Roanoke City that had 4 principals in 4 years.
Yeah.
And
right.
that was really hard.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know who I was, and I had to reintroduce myself every time. And when I had a problem, I had to figure out what their style was every time. So that retention is so important. So I'm glad that that's something that you're looking at. In terms of career learning, it doesn't just start in 9th grade, right? So a lot of kids think, oh, I've got to go to college, that's what my family does, or, and they may not consider it. How do we encourage kids in much younger grades to start to think about, what do they want to be when they grow up?
Well, those conversations do start early, and we have 6-year graduation plans for our learners as well, not to put them on this predetermined track, but so that they can engage in exploration. We've just begun this year. I brought to Roanoke City the AVID program, for instance. So AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. And this is really for kind of your first generation college going student. That we're beginning this in 8th grade in 2 of our middle schools, and we have the program in both of our high schools as well. And this teaches children how to explore the various careers and colleges, how to apply for college, how to create a resume, how to apply for a scholarship, how to tell the difference between studying and doing homework. Because a lot of times kids know how to do homework, but they get to college or but they don't necessarily know how to study. So we teach them how to take Cornell notes. We teach them how to sit in the front of the classroom. But those soft skills are critically important. Whether or not we're talking about a college pathway or career pathway, like you said, the skills are the same. We want our children to learn how to keep their word, how to finish a project, how to start it and finish it on time and on budget. How to, how to really dig in and to have integrity in their processes, so that whether or not they're choosing to apply to college or if they're going right into the workforce or directly into the military, we want them to have the wherewithal and the fortitude in order to do well.
One thing your predecessor, who I knew quite well, sure. Huge supporter of the arts and was very proud of the arts programs from pre-K all the way up to high school, but some of the amazing things that have gone on and you're blessed to walk into a really good arts faculty, of the ones I know anyway. Mm-hmm. How do those arts, I know we talk about STEM versus STEAM, where you add arts to that thing, but what is the role of the arts in hopefully every kid's education?
Well, I have to say that is another thing that drew me to Roanoke City, because I am such a supporter of the arts and athletics. Again, I think that these are programs that keep our kids connected to school. I know certainly for me, I was in a modern dance program and I was a cheerleader and I was in gospel choir. All of those things kept me connected to school, and I believe that they keep our kids connected as well. See, the arts, especially when it comes to the academics, we want our kids to be able to think creatively. I think it's what makes our country great as well. It's not just about the rigidity of understanding concrete skills, but where's the creativity in that? My daughter is studying architecture, and one of the things that they wanted to know when she applied to college was, do you have an arts portfolio? So yes, she needed the math background, but in addition to that, they want to know, if you're in architecture, are you building buildings that can withstand climate change, or if we can withstand wind forces and those kinds of things. You need the creativity piece in order to go with that. So in the STEM field. So we believe that the arts are incredibly important. It makes our kids well-rounded, it keeps them grounded, and it keeps them connected with a sense of belonging.
The questions that always come up, all these things sound great, how are we going to pay for them? I wonder, there's nothing good about the pandemic, we'll get that out there first, but I know that there are some kind of maybe once in a generation, once in a lifetime funding opportunities that are coming for governments and municipal organizations. Is the timing in some ways fortuitous for all of the capital plans you have with moving and adding and all of that?
I am grateful that our state and federal and local officials have seen the need to fully fund education, not only when it comes to learning loss and the staffing piece, but looking at kind of one-time opportunities for buildings and construction and those things that will be sustainable over time. We want to be fiscally responsible and careful, though, that, in terms of using funding for staffing, because the funding will run out. And so we have to be careful of a cliff effect where we don't want to be faced with furloughs or layoffs over time. So we do want to have the staff that we need in order to make sure that we're getting our kids caught up and moving them and progressing them forward. But we also need to be careful with not having to look at people 3 years from now and having to deliver bad news. So we're balancing that as a system. And we are using the one-time funding on our ventilation processes and on our buildings, looking at HVAC systems and other opportunities for construction. But the majority of our funds are really used for our kids on curriculum materials and instructional materials that will really get them not only caught up to speed, but advancing them.
Right. We have a little less than a minute left, and I just want to kind of close with this question. You know, what are your hopes for a child who's entering the school as maybe a preschool student next year?
Yeah.
What are your hopes for them?
Well, you asked me about my experiences earlier, and I talked about my experience as an educator, but I am also a mom. And so as a mom, I don't think my wishes, hopes, and dreams are any different than any other parent or guardian out there. What I want for our kids is the same thing that our parents want. As a mom or as a dad, you want to know that your child will be healthy, happy, safe, and strong. You want to know that your kid will engage in high-quality teaching and learning, and that they'll make good friends along the way. That's what I'm hoping for our kids too.
Well, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with you there. As we close the show, I just want to wholeheartedly thank Verletta White for being here today. Please know that you are welcome back anytime, and for what it takes, I'm Tom Landon. Thanks for watching.